Today I'm doing the review of the long-anticipated HO scale GMD SD40-2F from Bowser Manufacturing. The prototype GMD SD40-2F is a Canadian variant of the SD40-2, a legendary 6-axle diesel locomotive from the 1970s to the 1980s. Just 25 of these so-called Red Barns were built for the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1988 and 1989. They were numbered from CP 9000 to CP 9024. These locomotives were retired by Canadian Pacific from 2012 to 2016. Around 10 of them were rebuilt into SD30C Eco locomotives, and another 10 of them or so were sold to Central Maine and Quebec Railway, where they are still used for branch line freight service. The MSRP of Bowser's model is $219.95 US for DC and $319.95 for ESU Loksound equipped models. Typical retailer discount for these is around 25 to 30%. The packaging is identical to the Bowser SD40-2 that was released earlier this year, and also very similar to the newly released Intermountain and Atlas locomotives. There is a plastic sleeve that slides off the box, and then the top half of the box lifts off, followed by another plastic sleeve which you have to remove, and then 2 plastic clamshells hold on to the stand and the locomotive in place. The locomotive is bolted to the stand with 2 Phillips screws hidden under the fuel tank, which you must remove to separate the locomotive from the stand. My examples of the model are Canadian Pacific 9000 in the dual flags paint scheme, and also Canadian Pacific 9017 in the Action Red paint scheme with safety stripes. CP 9000 was delivered in the Action Red scheme and then repainted into the CP Rail System dual flag paint scheme in 1993. It is one of the few locomotives to be painted in this scheme, as it was not very well received. Apparently, people really hated having half an American flag on a Canadian locomotive. It stayed in this dual flag scheme until its retirement in 2012. CP 9017 was delivered in the Action Red scheme in 1988. The safety stripes were added sometime in early 2011, and the locomotive was sold to Central Maine and Quebec in 2015 and patched and then repainted into a Bangor and Aroostook heritage scheme in 2016. So for the record, the model of the CP 9000 fits from 1993 to 2012, and the model of CP 9017 fits from 2011 to 2015. Bowser pays a lot of attention in making these locomotive roll number and era specific, so it is a good idea to check where a locomotive model fits in the time frame. Bowser also has other variations of the SD40-2F that represents locomotives from an earlier time frame, which I am not going to go into detail, because I don't have the models, and honestly I haven't done any research on the locomotive numbers, so I can't really tell you anything. The key spotting feature of the SD40-2F Red Barn is that it has a full-width car body, with the walkways on the inside of the locomotive, as opposed to being outside on all the other SD40-2s. Another spotting feature is that it has a 3-piece vertical windshield design known as a triclops. This design is also found on 2 other EMD locomotives of the same era, which are the early production SD60M and the F59PH. The locomotive also features a tapered section immediately behind the cab, where the car body cuts in and then slopes outward. This design was used to help the crew see more clearly when reversing. It is known as the Draper Taper, named after William Draper, the man who created this design. This tapered design is also found on the Bombardier HR616, the GMD SD60F and SD50F, and also the General Electric -8 40cm locomotives. All locomotives using this design are from Canada. The SD40-2F Red Barn also has typical GMD spotting features, such as the nose headlight, ditch lights, bell mounted on the cab, tricolor class lights above the number board, and a single red headlight. However, it does not share other GMD features, such as vertical handrails and vertical steps. The handrails and steps on the SD40-2F Red Barns are all slanted, just like the American version for some reason. I want to point out here that the wheels on the model are not very clean when you get them, so be sure to clean them before you put it on the layout. I'm not so sure why they're so dirty. Maybe it's because they test them like crazy at the factory. and maybe the factory test track is not clean. I normally just use a piece of paper towel and some alcohol. The model comes with separately applied bell, horn, windshield wipers, mirrors, sunshades, air and signal hoses, coupler cut lever, lift rings, grab irons, plus other more goodies that you would expect from a Bowser locomotive. Etched metal see-through components include the steps, dynamic brake fan cover, winterization hatch, Q fans, and radiator vents. The handrails at the ends are plastic, the air hoses are brass parts, and the handrails in the middle are bronze wire. I just want to note how neatly the parts are applied onto the locomotive. Bowser does a really nice job making everything nice and straight, unlike many other model manufacturers who make really detailed models, but the assembly of the parts is very concerning. Here I will also point out one of my ditch lights on the CP9000 fell off, which was probably due to some accidental kit bashing by the post office. I was able to reinstall the ditch light with a tweezer. I found out my work is futile though, because I later discovered the 9000 is also missing several other parts, including a step on the engineer's side, a Sinclair antenna on the roof, and also a lift ring. I was not able to find these parts in the box, so it is very obvious that they fell off and were lost at the factory. The 9017, on the other hand, is almost perfect. There was only one loose plastic part that I needed to glue back into place. Don't be discouraged by the fact that I got a faulty model, because these things are handmade, and at the end of the day, people do make mistakes. Things get banged around and little pieces fall off, which I totally understand. That's also the drawback of buying these things online, because you don't get a chance to check for defects and test run the item before you buy it. Aside from the aforementioned issues, the models are spot on. The paint is evenly applied and the pad printed lettering is nice. Here you can see the markings next to the ditch lights and on the MU cable stand are clearly legible. The model weighs 558 grams, which is more or less the same as Bowser's SD40-2 cousin. The model comes with KD number 5 couplers mounted at the correct height. If you need to remove the shell for servicing, just unscrew and pull the coupler boxes off first, and then lift out this plastic rod that's near the front jacking pad on the engineer's side. Then the chassis and the shell should separate freely. The mechanism is almost identical to Bowser's SD40-2, with the exception of the placement of the number boards and class lights. I expect the performance of this SD40-2F to be identical to the SD40-2, so I won't be doing any tests to save you guys some time. You can check out my review of the Bowser SD40-2 in the link down in the description if you're looking for an overview of the drive mechanism and slow speed performance tests. One note I will make is that the speakers are not very loud and the echo chamber isn't sealed properly, so I definitely recommend getting these speakers replaced with sugar cube speakers or similar speakers with a proper sound chamber. The truck and fuel tank detail are similar to the SD40-2 as well, with some visible differences, such as open roller bearings and speed recorders installed, as opposed to having them in a parts bag. It's not the most detailed underframe in the HO scale market, but it's good enough for most users, I think. I personally don't spend a lot of time looking at underframe details. The bearings on the trucks do not rotate, because Bowser uses axle points to pick up power, and it's not possible to make rotating bearings in this case. There is a handbrake chain on the SD40-2F this time around, which is very nice, unlike the second run of SD40-2s earlier this year, which didn't have them. The wheels are all in gauge according to the MNRA standards gauge. Here's a demonstration of the sound and lighting features of the factory ESU Low Sound Select decoder. The DCC functions of this locomotive is identical to the SD40-2. If you have access to a Loc programmer, it is recommended that you download the GMD SD40-2 sound file, item number 75432, and write it to the decoder for more authentic sounds, including the silence prime mover and Canadian bell sounds. I will include a download link in the description below. For lighting, you have F0 headlights, F5 class lights, and F6 ditch lights. The number board is tied to the headlight function out of the factory, but you can change it with the Loc programmer. Just go into the function menu and delete auxiliary 6 from the F0 function and then remap it to another function button. I personally used F7 after getting rid of the switching mode on F7 because I don't need it. The lights are extremely well done, especially the ditch lights, where the LEDs are actually inside the housing instead of relying on clear plastic to conduct light. For sounds, F8 controls the prime mover, F9 is the full throttle function, where you can change the sound of the prime mover without changing the speed of the locomotive, and F4 is the dynamic brake. I consider this model of the SD40-2F Red Barn to be a follow-up of the epic GMD SD40-2 that Bowser did last year. It is really hard to believe that a rare prototype locomotive such as this one will be produced in ready-to-run plastic. The SD40-2F is equally well done as the SD40-2, perhaps even better with the inclusion of the etched metal and detail parts. It shares the drive mechanism with the SD40-2, which is one of the smoothest drives out there. The lighting features are also amazing. Bowser is the best when it comes to lighting functions. The speaker could have been better. Considering many other manufacturers are using dual sugar cubes, I am hoping that Bowser will catch on and do the same. The issues I have with CP9000 pertains to just the quality control of that one model, and I don't think it is a general problem, so I will not use these issues as part of my evaluation. Therefore, I will still rate this locomotive a solid 10 out of 10. Hopefully you won't run into the same problems that I had, but even if you do, I am sure that your retailer, or Mr. Lee English himself from Bowser, will stand behind his products and make things right for you. This is Ben signing out, August 4th, 2017.